know you didn't use it away, so. Hello. I'm Lori. Yes, I'm with Sam.
Oh, gotcha.
So, I work on it.
That was really weird. It's like walking across. It's like a little bit. It's like don't work too hard. Oversized. Super size.
My daughter, we're just teaching her so I'm going to get her into driving, so she can kind of but we are
Life just got better.
From Kia, when I was in the second year, and the engine's in the back, so that was
Carmen, yeah.
Remember those cars? I don't even know it, but the engine was in the back, so you had a little more.
Probably should have. There you go.
Why was I doing this on Wednesday?
Yeah, be careful for.
I did.
Because he's doing the new construction.
Oh, yeah. That's why I was this morning. That's good.
On the test.
Today is,
You would have common sense. Yeah. Yes.
We're getting all of that.
Yeah.
I'm going in.
How about you?
Yes, I usually do. I have a car.
Yes.
we're gonna do these classes more often. Last time I was here, that's why I was here.
I think you're right. I think that's true.
But I'm probably just running some copies of it today.
So that part might be new for you.
It just doesn't happen. Whatever, I will sort of run it.
Okay. Have fun. Just have fun. We'll schedule it. Okay, I think you're good.
One of the talents I have is
Make the mail out, say.
she said that they were
Where's she? Kennedy's was going to go last week. Where do you see her?
Right there.
Oh!
Love this thing. Aren't those fun? Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you Sam?
Love that. I love never to see that. I got here and see him like,
Yay.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was ready.
Yeah, just take that one. Nobody sits in the front row. I don't know why.
I know.
Well, because I got here.
Yeah, we got some of that. Now I'm all goosed up on sugar. I'm ready.
And all of
That's right. We love to drink our coffee. Where you going? Hey, how are you?
How are you doing?
Good. Oh, are you?
Hi. Good, how are you?
Yep. Where's this?
the what? The production machine?
Oh,
Yeah.
it was
You should go. I don't know what that's the reason.
I'll even drive.
I love driving. It's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
But that's fine.
So, but Rick will be
So about the whole new law.
Rick will be on Thursday. Tuesday is Jeff Dallas. Oh. I know, that's why I know.
Especially the people who live there.
I know, from
Okay,
there.
whatever it is.
I know, take me. I eat about 11 or 14 miles.
So next time you should suggest asparagus. I'm sure it'll be like asparagus, it's really good.
I'm sure it's your business, like not funny.
Not bad. I mean, I got a donut. Yeah, best day ever.
Not funny anymore.
What's up?
How are you?
Not bad.
Good. Starving. Yeah, good.
Working on it.
I'm glad I could feed you.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Sure.
Whenever you're ready.
Okay, welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. I am Mackenzie with Vanguard Title. We're super excited to be able to be here with you today and to organize these CE classes because it's just a way for us to be able to help you strengthen your business and get the needed tools and skill sets you need to do that. So huge thanks to Rick Lynn for providing breakfast for us all this morning.
Yay. Thank you.
And he's a citywide, he's right across the hall. And then, like you probably already know, today's class is on multiple offers and the new REPC being taught by Attorney Sam Bell. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to you.
We want Rick to tell us all about the big mortgage stuff before I start.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hopefully everybody knows me by now, but maybe not. I know there's a lot of you in here that haven't worked with me yet, which is unfortunate for you. I'm sorry. So, Rick Lynn with Citywide. I've been doing loans for 28 years. We're excited to be your partner over here. I'm just right across the hall, and I'm always available for you. So, you know, I'll bug you here soon and see if we can get together and so you guys can learn a little bit about what we can do to help your business. So, thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks for breakfast, Rick. We love donuts. So we've had the request that we start with multiple offers, and then we'll roll into the new REPC. And if you've already had the new REPC, you don't have to stay. Housekeeping, make sure you sign in. You get credit for both these, right? And if you sign in, we'll bank it. If you don't sign in, you're going to call us saying, where is it? And then we'll bank it. So just make sure you sign in, and it's somewhere.
That one's over there. The multiple offers is at the table,
Okay.
and I will put out the new REPC.
So it's by the donuts. Okay, so let's talk about multiple offers. First things first. This is what we're going to think about as we go through this. What's your responsibility as a buyer and a seller's representative to your client, to the others, and how do you best meet those responsibilities? Who made the other offers, right? And who should present the buyer-client's offer? The buyer's rep, the listing agent, or the broker, okay? So these are some of the things we're going to talk through as we go throughout this today. Now, if you have questions, I've already had people come up to me and say, hey, I got a question. Are you going to hit this? Are you going to hit that? If you're afraid I'm not going to hit it, or you have a question, which is why you're here today, feel free to raise your hand and let's talk through it. So let's start with the Code of Ethics. It's actually this Code of Ethics that made us even create a course on this. We got into it, two brokers, one of whom is named Rob Oakey, and another broker got into a fight about what this meant when it came to multiple offers and what agents should be doing when they're faced with multiple offers, right? And then, of course, as happens from time to time, they involve me and they want me to pick their side. And from time to time, I'll get this where they've made a bet, and then both sides will offer me half. And so it's a win-win for me. And I love those. So if ever you get into a fight with Rob, bet him money, and then call me, and if everybody offers me half, we're all going to be good. Okay? So in this case, as you read through this, who's ever read the Code of Ethics? You're not going to get in trouble if you... That's okay. That's how I feel about it, too. It's not the world's most fun read, right? It's boring. It's deathly boring. And the reason being is it was written by attorneys. We're going to see that in a second when we read through this together. And then I'm going to kind of rewrite it so it actually is written in human speak. So what we have is realtors in response to inquiries from buyers or cooperating brokers shall, with seller's approval, disclose the existence of offers on the property. Where disclosure is authorized, realtors shall also disclose, if asked, whether offers were obtained by the listing lecensee, another licensee in the listing firm, or by a cooperating broker. Right? We're all completely clear on this now, right? Yeah. We know why these two brokers were fighting. It's like, well, that makes no sense. It's perfectly clear. It's a mess. right? And this fight, I sided with Mr. Oakey, not because he's Rob, it's because I really believed in his side. And the other broker didn't like that, and actually got some of the drafters who wrote the code of ethics to get on a phone call with us, and then we argued about what it really meant. And then just for the record, Rob and I were right. So, ta-da, we win. So what I've done is that we're going to go through and read this in a different way, which is the way I think it should have been written to help us understand. So the first thing first. Whoa, we're going to skip it. I don't know where I'm going now. There we go. Okay. With seller's approval. First piece. With seller's approval. Now I'm going to hit the pause button. We're going to talk about that. Okay? So at some point, you're going to have a discussion with your seller about how they want to handle multiple offers, right? In a minute, we're going to talk about when that discussion should be, okay? But with seller's approval and in response to inquiries, okay, meaning somebody has to ask you. You have to get your seller's approval, and then somebody has to ask a question. We're going to talk about what your script should be when you're working for buyers. You, as a listing agent, shall disclose the existence of offers, right? So let's go back to this little argument we had with the brokers. What happened was the broker for the other people said, hey, if you have multiple offers and somebody calls and says, I have a buyer who's interested in the property, you kind of have to go, well, there's multiple offers. And we said, I don't think so. I don't think you actually have to do that. I think there's more to it than just that, right? And there is. You have to have your seller's approval. You have to, and you only have to tell them about multiple offers if they ask a question, right?
And if you're authorized.
And if you're authorized, okay? So let's talk about seller's approval. Here's my vision for how this might go. You're in your listing, you're doing your listing presentation, right? You say, hey, I'm so good that you're gonna have lots of offers at the same time. So how do you want me to handle those, right? Do you want me to tell other agents that we have other offers, or does that scare you? Okay. A lot of sellers, I think, are gonna look at you and say, oh, what do you think? You're the professional negotiator, right? You're the professional salesperson. What should I do? Comments? Let's have some argument for why they should disclose.
So it drives the price up.
Drives the price up, right? In a minute we're going to talk about this other version of me called REPC, which very few of you have actually seen but exists, right? But REPC would drive the price up, right? Any other arguments for why?
Competition.
Competition, right? It's scarcity. If you don't act now, right, we've got to push you off dead center. Yeah?
Leverage.
Leverage. Love it. Right? Anything else?
What about cleaner offers?
Cleaner offers, right? We're going to get the highest and best. I know that's a term we all love in this industry, highest and best, right? We're going to talk about what that means too in a minute. Any other reasons? What about against? What if the seller goes, God, I don't know. What if it scares a buyer away, right? So that is the case. There have been deals where buyers, that's just not their personality type. They don't like the competition. That scares them off, right? So that's another potential. Me personally, I would love to have multiple offers. Like, let's get this thing sold. Let's drive the price up, right? But I think that's a discussion you ought to have during the listing presentation, even if it's a slow market. Lately, in the last, couple of years, inventory's been low, things have been hot, right? But even when inventory's high and it's more of a buyer's market, there's a chance you're going to price this home just right and you're going to get a lot of interest. Or it's a good home in a good location and everybody wants in, right? So it's a discussion I'd have in my listing presentation every time. What do you want me to do? Now you might get a seller who says, let's kick that can down the road and talk about it when it happens. The issue is when it happens, if you guys can't connect with how fast offers have to be responded to, it may be too late, right? Yesterday we were looking at a deal where the seller, I was actually meeting with the seller, and how many of you know Matt Barton, your principal broker, the guy who's liable for everything you do wrong? he would like you all to know him, but not in a bad way, in a good way. Same way I'd like you all to know me in a good way, not a bad way. But we were sitting with a seller who accused an agent at Everest of pressuring her to sell the home because he called her, I just said it's a he, so now we've eliminated half our agents, right? But he called her and said, you have to respond by 5 o'clock today. And she felt like it was a hard sell on his behalf, when in fact that was the deadline on the contract, right? She wouldn't believe me, even though we looked at the contract, so whatever. But, you know, it's usually really fast. So it's a good thing to have this discussion early. Okay, now in response to inquiries, we're going to go to the next slide and look at what questions we should always be asking when we're working with a buyer and calling the other side. Always, always, always. Now let's look at this next piece. So that's just the first. The next piece is even more information. It says where disclosure is authorized. Again, you got to start with, did your seller say you can disclose? So you're going to ask your seller two things. I'm going to back off. I don't know why that's not highlighted today, but it's not. If disclosure is authorized, so you're going to say, hey, seller, how do you want me to respond to people who ask if we have multiple offers? Can I tell them we have multiple offers? Yes or no? Yes. Check, right? Now, they're going to ask me a second batch of questions about who those offers are from. Can I tell them that? Yes or no? No. Why not?
Confidentiality thing, maybe?
Confidentiality. I love it. Thank you for bringing that up. Nothing about this is confidential except for what your clients told you, right? Yeah. Like, you'll get people, and we're going to talk about that in a second too. How to chat up the other side, but it's really not. Our duty of confidentiality exists with our client. Now, if you're in a limited agency situation, obviously you have to keep both sides secrets. But if it's not limited agency, it's not confidential.
Can
right?
you tell them the amounts?
Can you tell them the amounts? If authorized, yeah.
Nice.
Interesting, huh? So we'll talk about buyer side questions. But so we want to ask, if we have multiple offers and they ask me, seller, who those are from, can I disclose that, right? And then so it says where disclosure is authorized, so the seller says yes, if asked. Okay, now that triggers on a buyer side, more stuff to ask when we call. They shall also disclose whether the offers were from the listing licensee, meaning you're in a limited agency situation, another licensee in the listing brokerage, right? So the brokerage is in a limited agency, or just from somebody else in the industry, right? Now, if you're on the buyer side, why would you want to know whether or not you're dealing with someone who's got limited agency? Double commission, right? The motivation is there for them to sell it, right? And we'll get into a discussion here towards the end about who should be presenting these offers, right? Because if my incentive is to collect both sides of a deal, am I really going to be pushing the offer of your client as hard? Maybe not, consciously I shouldn't be going, hey, I'm going to just push mine the hardest, right? But subconsciously, the motivation is there, right? So talk about presenting offers here in a little bit too. I've made all these promises. Is somebody noting all these so you can hold me accountable? Keep saying it later. We're going to talk about this.
It's okay to record, right?
Yes. In fact, we're being filmed. I don't know who's watching, but maybe George is up there somewhere watching and seeing if I'm teaching you good or bad things. So let's go back to the questions. So I made this promise. We're going to talk about like a script, dialogue. So when you're on the buyer side, you've got to ask at least two things, right? The first thing, are there other offers on the property? Pretty simple, right? Calling, I got a client, they're interested in the property, are there other offers on it? Now what we've done is just, if we go back, we've triggered their duty to tell us yes or no, as long as the seller has authorized that. Now we're going to flip-flop for a minute. So you're the seller, you're the listing agency, and you get this question. And you know that there's multiple offers. But your client has said, I don't want you to disclose that.
I'm unauthorized to tell you.
Thank you. Very simple. I am unauthorized to share that information, or I'm unauthorized to tell you. Now, I like to do this poll every time. Now, if you hear that on the buyer side, what do you assume? Everybody agrees. I've taught hundreds of agents this, and everybody else says, yes, that means yes, there are. In reality, it doesn't mean anything. It just means they're not authorized. But I know we're going to assume that yes. But that's the answer. If your seller hasn't authorized to say yes or no, you just stick with that script, right? I'm unauthorized to tell that or share that information, okay? But make sure you ask, are there other offers on the property? And then the second one, where did the offers come from? Because that triggers their duty to tell you, oh, it's one of my clients, it's one of our brokerage clients. You know, you can flesh it out and go, what do you mean? Well, is it you? Is it one of your personal buyers? Is it a buyer from your brokerage? Is it just buyers from other brokerages, like self-represented buyers, aka homie buyers? Like, what is this, right? So those are two you always want to ask.
Why does that matter though, that second one?
It just helps you understand where you stand in relation to this multiple offer situation, to help you advise your client. And then the last piece here that I have is chat them up and get as much information as possible. In a negotiation where we're competitive and there's lots of buyers, we want as much information as possible to help our buyer increase the chance of them succeeding, right? And this goes to one of my big rules of professionalism. These are the Sam Bell rules of professionalism, not the code of ethics, but one of them is don't pee in the pool that you have to swim in, right? You don't want to be the jerk in the industry. Because when you try to chat somebody else up or ask questions, they're not going to be willing to share. The thing is, we all know those jerks, right? There's a dozen, there's more than a dozen. There's a handful of them that if I said any of their names, you'd all go, oh yeah, that guy, right? Same in the legal profession. There's a bunch of attorneys that all the other attorneys know are complete jerks, and we don't want to work with them. We don't want to help them, right? So you want to treat them well, right? And just chat them up. Now, let me give you an example. We have people come into our office all the time. And I've got clients who feel like attorneys are required to be bulldogs. You should never be nice, ever. Never be nice to the other side. They're the enemy, and I just want you to latch on and not let go, okay? I even had a client once upon a time, we were getting ready for negotiation, and they said, hey, can you seat them so the sun is shining through the windows in their eyes? And would you mind turning up the temperature a little bit so it's uncomfortable, and then we can leave every so often to talk, but it's just us trying to cool off. And, you know, give them warm water. But they had all of this strategy to make it really uncomfortable for the other side during this negotiation, right? And in their mind, they thought, this is a good way, this is a great way to win. And I have the exact opposite. I said, no, here's what we're going to do. We're going to offer them not just cold water, but coffee, tea, sodas. You know, we've got, at our office, we've got a big soda fridge full of drinks. If you don't believe me, swing on by one day and we'll sit you in the conference room in a comfortable chair, get you something you want to drink, right? We're going to take good care of them because it's going to make this a lot easier. And they're going to share stuff. Now, and then we're going to chat them up, right? We're going to be their friend. Okay? Another situation, we had a case, we were litigating a case. We're in court, and I'd spent a lot of time in court on this case. And my client would never show up, but the other attorney's client was there every single time. So while we were waiting, I would talk to the other attorney, and I knew all about his kids, their piano lessons, what sports teams they liked, what sports teams they played on, all kinds of stuff about that attorney. Well, his clients would sit there quietly listening, and then one day they started asking questions about me and my kids, and we connected. We said, we're both Utah fans, right? We like Utah football. And then they decided, hey, this guy's okay. Because their attorney was a BYU fan, and you know that wasn't working for them. We connected that we were Utah fans. We talked about the season. We talked about stuff. This is me talking directly to the other side, right? Well, over a couple of court hearings, we've got so familiar with each other. We walk in and, hey, how's it going? Hey, how's it going? They forgot who I was, the enemy, right? Anything they tell me, I have a duty to tell my client. We have the same types of duties, right? If I learn something, and if you learn something, we got to take it back to our principal and tell them, right? One day we're sitting in court, and we were talking about stuff, kind of joking around. And then they turned to their attorney and started having a very serious and what should have been a very private conversation about the strength of their case and the weaknesses that they knew they had. Guess who's there? There's no secrets anymore. You only have secrets with your attorney if you guys are alone. They weren't alone. I was there, right? And at some point their attorney goes, "Whoa, stop. Sam's here. We forgot. He's the enemy. Stop talking. Let's go into the other room and finish this conversation," right? Now I've got a whole bunch of information for my client. Yeah?
Did you advise your client not to be there?
No. My client was so mad that they just refused to show up. Okay. So anyway, but it works for you too, right? You can talk to the other agents. You can, and then you can ask questions. Now let's get back to this confidentiality idea. Are there other offers on the property? Yes. Who are they from? Oh, you. Well, how much are they for? Right? Is there any kind of, there's no law that says you can't ask that. And quite frankly, there's no law that says they can't tell you.
Really?
But how much are they for? All cash? Financing? Contingent on the sale of a house? Like, tell me about these offers, right? You can ask those questions. Now, if you're being asked those questions, what you need to think is, okay, they're not technically secret. Have I had the conversation with the seller about whether I should be sharing that much information? And is it in my seller's best interest to share that information? We have a competing fiduciary duty, right? So we go back to real estate school and we talked about fiduciary duties. And if you're like me, when I was in real estate school, my eyes glassed over. I went, that sounds really important, but it's totally confusing. So I'm not entirely sure what that means. One of them is to act in the best interest of your client. It's the duty of loyalty, okay? As a buyer and a seller, as a buyer's agent, listing agent, completely opposite, right? As a buyer's agent, you should be asking them all kinds of questions. Because the more information your buyer has, the better they can be set up to share and make a really competitive offer. As a listing agent, you got to be asking yourself, should I be answering any of these questions? Does it actually help my seller? Okay? And have that conversation, get that permission. But chat them up. Treat them nice. Don't put the sun in their eyes. Make them sweat, right? Treat them nice. And they will share a lot of information. Okay? Any questions before we move on to the next one? All right. So when you're working with sellers and buyers, both sides, it doesn't matter. You need to get to know your client, right? You need to understand who they are and how they're going to react to competitive bid. Okay? And then ask yourself, how can you mitigate buyer's remorse? Okay, so now I get to learn about my other personality, which my wife calls Race Sam. And Race Sam loses his mind when there's a competition, right? She got this, once upon a time I used to race motorcycles. It wasn't that long ago. It's probably shorter than most people think. And what would happen is I would get on the start line and I would forget everything. Like, I would forget that I'm human and could break. I would forget that I had a family that I should be taking care of. I would just at all costs try to win, just wide open. And woke up in the last time I raced, I woke up in an ambulance and I went, yeah, bad idea. I gotta provide, right? But it's because I would just go as fast as I possibly could, because something comes over me, right? The same thing happens when I buy a house. Every house I have ever lived in that I've bought during a hot market with multiple offers. And this is what happens. I'll just tell you the story of the first house I bought. Actually, we didn't even get it. We were making offers. So we make an offer on this house that I kind of liked. I didn't love the area. I didn't like the house so much. We make an offer, and they come back and they say, hey, we have multiple offers. Submit your highest and best. Well, our highest and best was higher than it should have been. higher than we could probably actually afford. We qualified. We all know how that works. We can qualify, but can we actually afford, right? And why was it that? Because I wanted it. I wanted to win. I'd actually lost sight of whether I liked the house or not. I just wanted to win. Okay? The good thing is my agent understood that because he was my dad. Oh boy, this kid, he's going to get himself into trouble. So he helped talk us down a little bit, right? He said, now, are you really actually, when that first payment comes and you got to live on ramen for your first 5 years, is that really what you want? And he talked us back down off the ledge a little bit. Okay? So, you know, you ought to talk to your clients. Hey, if it gets it, how competitive are you? Think for a minute, how many of us know George Morris at all? Right? We've seen him. Is that guy competitive or what? Right? He's race George, but it's not his other personality. It's just him all the time, right? You gotta understand, like, how are they going to react? And are they going to go over the price? We've got to understand that, okay? And the next thing, we got to set outlines and clear expectations with them and understand their objectives and their limits. So back in my story of me trying to make an offer on my first house, my agent, also dad, understood exactly financially where I was and what I could afford, right? So he was able to step in and go, whoa, you should slow down a little bit and let's get it down to where you'll be able to live with yourself if you win, okay? So you got to sit down and understand this. This actually is just working with people in general, right? If you're going to be someone's agent, you really need to understand what their objectives are, what the limitations are, okay? Where do we stop? So if you can't see this, it's a little Dilbert cartoon. It says, how are you doing on your unspoken objectives? My what? I'm referring to the goals I have in my mind that I've never mentioned. How are those going? I'm totally nailing them, right? You do not want to be in this situation. Okay. You've got to know. The next thing is you should plan, right? You need to work to develop a negotiation strategy. And the good thing about this is you'll look like the world's greatest agent, either way, right? It either works or it don't. And we do this as well. We'll sit down and people say, well, what can we expect? I've been sued or I have this problem. What can we expect? And we'll walk them through the process. And even if you've never really personally been in a multiple offer situation, the process is kind of the same. What can you expect? Well, we're going to gather in, they're going to gather in everybody's offers. The seller's going to look at them. You know, we're going to be notified. Here's some of the things you should think about, some of the things you shouldn't. Okay? You're going to look well prepared and like a hero. And if they get it, they're going to tell all their friends, I have the best agent, right? And even if they don't, they're still going to tell their friends, I have the best agent.
On authorization, can you ask them specific, like, can I tell them price, should I tell them price, or what?
So going back to talking to your seller?
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I would say, hey, can I tell them price? So we're sitting here, we're planning with our seller, say, okay, we get multiple offers. People are going to ask me about how much the other offer, what do you think, right? Should I tell them? Should I not? What about other terms? Okay, we're going to talk about terms, I think, on the next slide. You know, how much should I be disclosing when they ask?
But
Absolutely.
lots of times the seller will ask you, what do you think? Should we tell them price or not?
Yeah. What do you guys think about telling them price?
I
Good
don't know, I
question.
got mixed feelings, I've not done it for so long.
I got mixed
I
feelings.
think
do too.
as professionals, we shouldn't really start asking too many questions to the sellers because you're the professional. You need to advise, you need to lead. To me, to be able to disclose prices is terrible. There's
Yeah.
no way, because what about if some other buyers want to go a little higher than that? I mean, you're totally minusing that at all, so you will never, at least that's my opinion, will
Talk
disclose
about
price.
price.
Yeah.
Yes.
If you do get authorization from your seller, have them email you so you have it in writing.
Bingo. Did we all hear that? So you're at the listing presentation talking to your seller about, hey, multiple offers, am I authorized? share the information about whether we have them, who we got them from. What about other information, like if they ask about, I keep hitting this, if they ask about price or they ask about the other terms, what am I authorized to share, right? And then go back and get an email or send an email just to confirm that you've said that I can share this information with buyer's agents. Yeah.
So you're having that conversation at negotiation table.
Mm-hmm.
You say, what can I share? I don't know. You're the professional. You decide.
You decide. I hate those.
So are we leaving ourselves open if we say, okay?
Yes, because they love the idea of you deciding it, and they want you to decide in case the decision's wrong, right? I mean, there's the skeptical attorney in me.
What would the best?
And if it's wrong, whose fault was it, right? And then all of a sudden, you're the worst agent ever.
Giving advice outside of our profession, even though we're in the deal.
Exactly. And so the way I respond, because I get that all the time, well, I don't know, you know, what should I do? And unless it's somebody I've done a lot of work with, I'm very familiar with, I kind of know the way they go, I usually say, you know what, I'm not comfortable doing that. I don't have to live in this house, or I don't have to live with the sale of this house. You do. So I need you to guide me.
Could we just say, here's what might be some ideas, what do you think, what feels best for you?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, you can share ideas, right? And that demonstrates your knowledge and your competence and your professionalism, right? So, well, here's some thoughts, you know, the pros and cons of sharing price. We heard no, I would never share price, right? But why would you share price? Well, it could drive up the offer.
Yeah.
The highest and best could be even higher. You might have race Sam on the other side.
Right, that's what
We don't care if he can't live with that payment after the fact. We already sold.
Say yes to sharing if there's other offers, but not on price to keep them thinking.
Exactly.
So you get race Sam and they're over guessing.
Exactly. And maybe we want to share, hey, no, none of our other offers are contingent on the sale of a house, right? So are we sure we even want those? Maybe, maybe not. Okay? So I think you could share. Here's some ideas, here's some things. What would you be comfortable with sharing? Here are the pros and cons. And then just guide them and let them make that decision. Sean, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, but you said it already.
Oh. Hey, how about
Good
that?
job.
Thank
Read
you.
my mind.
Okay, so the next thing, strategies, right? Different strategies. Is it always about price? No, right? But just think about, y'all have the new REPC for the next little bit, but think about how many different contingencies the REPC has, and all of the different addenda and things you can incorporate that are contingencies, right? Those are all important things to a seller. Now what about concessions like closing costs? I mean, we could sit up here and diagram out, you know, a $300,000 offer and just write purchase price $300,000 across the board, right? And then go down and go, okay, this one wants you to pay 1% of closing costs. Is that now $300,000 offer? No, it's $300,000 minus 1%, right? And what about this one that's, yeah, maybe it's $310,000, but it's conditioned on the sale of a property that hasn't been listed yet, and and your seller's got to get out of there in a month to go to their new job somewhere. Okay? Is that $310,000 really worth that? Right? No. I mean, so there's a lot of different options and opportunities just within the REPC to sweeten the offer. Now the new REPC, for those of you who've used it, and it should be hopefully all of you because it's after January 1, like the financing condition now has a line where you can write how much of the earnest money becomes non-refundable after due diligence deadline expires, right? That's just another way to try to sweeten the pot. Does the earnest money go hard, right? So these are just some of the things that are in the REPC. How many of you have seen weird other strategies when it comes to sweetening the pot for the seller? Yes?
The escalation clause is big right now.
The escalation. I'm so glad you brought that up. Let's talk about the escalation clause. Does everybody know what that is? So my purchase price isn't $300. It's $1 more than the next highest purchase price, right? And is that what you're seeing?
Not to exceed X amount of
Oh,
dollars.
good. So you just said not to exceed. I have seen those where there is not and not to exceed. Now, what have you just done for your buyer if you write $1 more than the next highest, but didn't actually put a limit? You just committed them to an infinite amount of money. Think about this. So you do one of those, and you get a crafty agent on the other, one of the other buyers that goes also $1 more than the highest offer. But there's no limit. So which one's the highest offer, right? I don't know. Yeah. And if you're on the listing side and you get one of those, are you going to say you should take this one? I don't think I would. Right? We don't know. Now, if you're going to use the, yeah.
Well, I don't know if this is nice, but I have questions on that as far as, I think the strategy sounds awesome.
Yeah.
For my buyer.
Mm-hmm.
But then, if it gets accepted, I'm like, well, how do I really know what the highest one was? I mean,
Bingo.
Ethically, you shouldn't be, what?
You put the wording in there that says that you're allowed to see the next highest offer so that you know.
So you can see,
Yeah.
and that's.
And I'm going to take that even further. Because how do I know they're giving me the next highest offer, right? So I would, if you are going to use an escalation provision, right? You have to have a limit. How much is your client actually willing to spend on this house? $1 more than the next highest offer, up to $310,000, right? You also need to write in there that you have the right, if your offer is accepted, you have the right to see all other offers. That goes back to that confidentiality thing we talked about, where it's like, well, can I? Yes, you can, because they're not confidential, right? The seller can provide those to your buyer. Okay? But I would write to see, I want to see the whole thing. I want to know what that is. Yeah.
And I thought about that as well. But all these buyers that are presenting these, because I mean, there's some confidential information and stuff in there to some extent. That's okay that you're seeing all of these other buyers' information.
Yeah. I mean, and hopefully nobody's writing their socials in there, things like that, right? It's just their name.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes?
We still have the right to pick other offers for other reasons.
Oh, absolutely, right? Escalation is just about price. But we'll talk about some of the other, well, let's talk about it now, right? So let's say it's a buyer. A buyer writes that in who's never actually walked through the house. I know guys and ladies, I know people that flip. And they write 10 offers, they've never even seen the house. They're just trying to get some under contract, and then they're going to cancel on due diligence. That's not a good offer, right? They're just locking it up before they see it and decide whether they're going to cancel, right? So that might be something that, hey, it's subject to due diligence, and I don't, who is this person? Like, they haven't seen the property. We don't know who they are. Is that going to be a good offer? So there's lots of other reasons, or like subject to the sale of a house. I have a really sweet escalation clause, but then, I've got 6 months to sell my other house. That doesn't make sense, or maybe it does, but it might not. Yeah. Yes.
You represent the buyer.
Uh-huh.
How do we have any kind of strategy if we are up against the other highest multiple offer is the listing agent who brought another person in, and he would also have to sell their home? Because that's what I was up against in November.
Also.
And they actually took our offer. It was the weirdest thing. But the listing agent had other buyers who didn't have to sell off property in Salt Lake, but they would to buy this house.
So the limited agent had brought other offers to the table, but
Right.
those offers were subject to the sale, right?
Well, no, it wasn't. They didn't have to, on paper, sell that other house, but they would eventually, down the road, sell that house, and he would get the listing on that.
Interesting, right? So that.
He was very ethical, very ethical,
Yeah. And that's a challenge that we're going to have, and we will talk about who should present and how to do that, right? So I'm going to put a bookmark in that for a minute.
Okay.
Yes.
When you're chatting up the other agent,
that could be part of that conversation after you
Absolutely.
get some rapport. Say, I don't see anything here on this offer that says buyer needs to sell another home.
Yeah.
Is that the case with this buyer? And someone's like, oh yeah, I forgot all about that.
Oh yeah, I forgot. I'm sure you did, right?
You resubmit your offer then. Is that in there?
And the nice thing is the new REPC requires that disclosure.
Yeah.
So we have at least one more step to get closer to agents hiding the fact houses have to be sold under the financing condition. Any other crazy, like, I think we've killed the escalation clause. Anything else that you've seen?
When you put the, I want to see all other offers, what if you're on the listing side and you don't want to show them all the other offers?
Then you would counter, say, no, you just have to take our word for it.
Well, I mean, I'd show them one or two, but on this last one I put up, I had 13.
You had 13 offer?
Yeah, and
That's
the
a
one
lot.
before that, I had.
So I would count. I would, I'd sit down with my seller and go, is it something you really want to dump on them, or should we just show them the next two highest and counter with that, right? So you could counter with something less than everything.
You can also use the additional earnest money, put that in, so it's 500,000, whatever, and that's the sellers if you decide to keep it.
Absolutely, additional earnest money. We all heard that? It's about sweetening that. Like, this is how serious we are. It's not just that first $1,000. We're going to put another 5 into the pot here as we get to a certain point, right? That's a great way to do it. And the non-refundable earnest money, that's pretty good too.
Just say one thing that's helped a lot. I actually had, I was representing the buyer on multiple offer situation, and he just barely beat the other offer, not by much money, but we were able to do a lease back. Just because I asked, what's important to the seller, is there something specific they need? So
Yeah.
they needed about 3 to 4 weeks because they were building a new house. So just because of that, I think that's why he was able to get that.
Yeah, so we all heard that, the sale lease back, right? The seller is building. When you're chatting them up, you learn, hey, where's the seller going? Oh, they're building. Well, when's the house going to be done? Well, not for 6 more months. Oh, maybe sale lease back might be a good way to sweeten that pot, right? Any other, have you seen anything else? Yes, Miss Jessica?
I have a question, and I might be moving ahead, but I recently had 8.3I with the REPC 1. It doesn't make sense to me.
You act like they have
Because,
memorized.
well, I had someone put in there that will put an additional 20,000
Yeah.
in there, so they put an additional 20,000 on 8.3I. But they said, and then the $20,000 is non-refundable based on due diligence, but that doesn't make sense because the trigger is financing and appraisal.
Yeah, that makes no sense
Doesn't
there.
make sense,
No,
right?
that was a big mistake.
So I got on the phone with their broker, and he's like, yeah, I helped write this, I can see how the language doesn't make sense. I'm all, yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But he said to me, well, you could do it. I said, why wouldn't we just write it that $20,000 is non-refundable after due diligence? Why are you even putting 8.3? He's like, well, you could do it either way. I'm like, but you couldn't, right?
No, I wouldn't put it there. That's for
Okay, so
non-refundable after due diligence only, right?
okay.
And so you would do like maybe additional earnest money,
But why
or
is
you'll
it talking about financing and appraisal?
On-
And if it's non-refundable after due diligence?
Well,
yeah, I don't know what they were thinking, to be honest.
No, in
Oh.
here, 8.3.
it says either,
So
whichever's later.
8.3 BI, right? Buyer's right to cancel before financing and appraisal deadline. Okay, so they still have the right to cancel, and then that blank is how much of the earnest money becomes non-refundable if they do cancel.
After financing and appraisal.
After, let's see here. So it says written notice no later than financing and appraisal, then this $sign becomes. So that blank is between the expiration of due diligence and the expiration of finance and appraisal. Just that one little window of time.
A week.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
We can talk about it more.
okay, sounds good.
Okay, all right. So additional earnest money. How about the letters? Have you ever seen buyers write letters to sellers? Okay.
Or do the presentation yourself for the seller.
Do the presentation yourself. Let's talk about the letters just really quick, right? Not very long ago, there was a seller who decided in a multiple offer situation, they actually asked for the letters, right? I think we've all heard about buyers who wrote a letter, but this seller said, hey, we'd like a letter and a picture.
Person?
No.
What? Why is this a bad idea? Any thoughts?
Sounds like red
Well, it
lights.
can't be your idea, but.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Can the seller do that? It just can't be your idea.
The seller could ask. The problem with us participating in that is it's a fair housing problem.
Right, it's red light
Right?
stuff.
Yeah. So are we all familiar with, yeah, all kinds of fair housing questions. What was that?
It's not our decision, it's theirs. We're not.
It's not our decision, but that's one I would say I strongly recommend against. For these reasons.
We have license.
Federal law says that I can't help you discriminate based on a number of factors, and state law adds a few, like source of income and gender identity and sexual orientation, right? Pictures.
No.
Now, have you ever thought about this? So of all the categories of protected classes under fair housing, every single one of us is a member of every single class, right? I think a lot of times, if you happen to have skin that's my tone and you live in a place like Salt Lake, you think, oh, that's for other people. It's not necessarily, it's for everybody, right? And I really don't like the idea of picture. Now, sometimes your buyers will write a letter and send it, and we can't control if the buyer's gonna deliver directly to the seller, or the seller's gonna, skip us and go direct to the buyer for some more information. But don't participate in that, yeah.
And your seller also says, my neighbors would really be upset if you sold to these people.
Yeah.
Pick your.
That just so happened to be a different religion, for example.
Yeah.
Just picking one random
Or
one.
BYU in Utah,
Yeah,
whatever.
BYU people.
No, this is Utah Street.
Actually, I live in a BYU street and they all hate me because I have a big flagpole with a big flag. Yes.
If I'm the listing agent and I end up sending out a multiple offer letter so that everybody's aware that there are multiple offer letters, you put a time and a date on that. What if you get an offer a few hours later after that cutoff time?
Yeah.
Do you have to submit that to your seller or do you not?
You have to submit anything you get to your seller, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so even after that?
Even after that.
Okay.
Yep. Now, if they've already accepted something, I would still go, oh, by the way, we got this.
Right, but that buyer's agent that sent over the offer 4 hours late, even if I submit that to the seller, well, I guess my question is it fair to the other buyers that had this deadline to make this quick decision, and then I still have to deal with this loan offer 4 hours later?
Well, so here's my answer, and it may sound cold-hearted attorney, which is fine because that's what I am, right? So
You just said we're warm-hearted.
you don't have to be fair to the other buyers. You have to be fair to your client who's the seller, right?
Right.
And so if it comes in, you have a responsibility to hand that to them. And shame on that other buyer's agent for being late, right? Yes?
So what happens if the late offer is the best, the highest offer, and the seller accepted?
Then everybody else is out
Second best.
of the deal, yeah.
Yeah, and you set it up to acceptance. Once you've already accepted, and one comes in later, you still have to give it to your client, your seller, and show it to them. We've already accepted this one. So where do we go here?
Now, where do we go? Maybe
You
it's a
can-
counter as a backup or
Counter,
something like that.
and then the seller could do that counter, say, well, we've received other offers after the deadline, which are better than yours. I mean, you don't actually say that on the addendum, but counter back with some terms that are closer to that offer. And if they accept, great. If they reject, then you go to the other offer.
Yeah. Any other weird things? Yes.
I just have one question.
Okay.
So, representing the seller, let's say I get 4 offers. 2 of those offers have a photo of the family, letter, and the other 2 don't. What is your recommendation?
Christmas card.
Sadly, you would have to present.
Or if someone sent a
Not
video.
sadly. That came out totally wrong. Erase that. Now that I've pointed it out to everybody that I made a big mistake. You do have to present things to your client, right? But I would probably just go, hey, look, to the other agent, hey, I'm uncomfortable, you put me in a weird situation because you've now provided me something that could create a fair housing problem. And I'm doing it because I'm obligated to do it, but no more, right? And then, hey, client, please be colorblind, whatever blind, you know, to this, and make an objective decision. It's never objective, right? So a few years ago, there was a write-up in, I think it was Realtor Magazine, about a multiple offer situation where one of the buyers offered a free year supply of pizza to the seller. The buyer happened to own, you know, like the hottest pizza place in town, and so hey, you get a pizza a week for a year, right? And they won. They got the deal. And they did it. Now, that's something of value that your lender's going to want to know all about. But you know, completely different than anything else. Really made that offer stand out. Okay, we've been toying with the idea of presenting. Who presents? Now, who's had your license for more than 15 years? Okay, do you remember the good old days? That when I had my license, we actually went and presented the offer to the seller, right? It's not that way anymore. We like email it. It's all DocuSigned or .loop signed or whatever, and it's just shipped over. But there's no rule against saying, hey, we've got an offer and we would like to come and present it to the seller, right? There's another concept called group presentation where you can say, hey, everybody bring your offers. Physically come to the conference room and we're all going to sit down and read them out loud together, right? I don't know of anybody who's ever done that. It seems kind of weird. But the individual presentation, it'd be awesome. You should try. Next thing you have, just do it for fun and see who shows up, right?
Could be some.
So hey, sellers, it's gonna be totally entertaining. You want to watch? It's like Battle of the Salespeople in the octagon. Go, right? Yeah.
So if our due diligence is to our seller, is it really in our seller's benefit to have the buyer's agent come, because the buyer's agent may try and chat it up with the seller and try and gain more information? So I've had several buyer's agents try and do this. All I have to do, I have a conversation with my seller, tell them the pros and cons, they make the decision. Heck no, we're not doing that. Send it over like everybody else does.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a conversation to have with your seller if a buyer's agent requests it, right? But as a buyer's agent, if you can get in, it's your opportunity to sell your client and that offer to the seller, right? And you know, the concern right here that, hey, what if the seller has limited agency and they could monkey around with things, right? This hijacks that, right? This allows you to go in and do the presentation yourself, okay? Really gives you that opportunity. I think a lot of people would think it's weird because a lot of people don't even know that that used to be the norm, right? Yes?
But as a seller's agent, you aren't obligated to allow that.
It's your seller's choice, right? So you sit down, say, hey, they've requested to like come over, hand you the offer, and talk us through it. Is that something you'd be comfortable with? And the seller, like we know, may say, I don't know. What do you think? You can say whatever you want to say.
So what other pros and cons to have the buyer agent come present to seller? If I represent a seller, I would not feel comfortable.
Yeah.
But then how am I going to convince my sellers if don't let them come?
Okay, so the question is, what are the pros and cons for from the seller's perspective of having an individual presentation? You don't feel comfortable with it, but we need to give them a balanced view of, you know, what is it, so that you can decide.
It'd be faster. If you had everyone in there, you could really get it done.
It would be faster, right? Be a lot more like $1 Million Listing. I'm sure nobody ever watches that. Especially me. I don't watch that yet, no. But they're always on the phone with each other. I don't know if that's reality TV or really how it's done in New York and LA. But, you know, it would be faster to get a lot closer, right? Any other pros? Yeah?
I think it humanizes it, but I used to do it a lot. It is faster, but it does create some sway with the other agent. But that's helpful sometimes too.
Yeah. Yeah.
You don't want to be on the phone with people
time, you gotta be in front of them sometimes.
Personal, it's good, right? Because you can read body language and tone and all that stuff.
A couple of years ago, I sold my neighbor's house. I had two offers that were virtually the same. And I got to know both buyers, them and their families pretty well, because I live right next door. And so I can't say that it made me feel like it actually did make me feel like I was a limited agency, as I knew their stories, what they were going to do. Fortunately for me, one of them withdrew their offer, and I was left with the one that actually moved in. So,
sure.
But it kind of made me feel weird, with these people that I know now, and which neighbor do I choose? Because now it's my interest, not the interest of my seller.
It's true.
And both of them would have been good.
Yeah. Interesting. Yes.
So, I'm very new at the game here, but I've had a client ask me, would I be able to meet up with the seller? And so we're talking about the buyer agent being present. What about the buyer?
You could absolutely request that the buyer's present with you.
Buyer and seller would have to authorize that.
Yes. Yes. Yep. Yep. Any other thoughts on this?
I had situations that buyer somehow got the contact of my seller, and the buyer called my seller directly to negotiate.
Oh, good. And then they go, what do I need you for? And we have a contract. Yeah, I don't. I wouldn't. It's not the best. I mean, I've negotiated directly with people, but they have an agent for a reason, right? Yeah.
I had a commercial property that exact thing happened. The two agents, the listing agent, I was the buyer's agent, we were basically shut out. The two got together. I mean, this has been going on for 6, 8 months. And I kept asking the listing agent, well, how much more? Are they going to give me any information at all? And so the buyer and the seller had been together before and had some rapport, and he knew the seller knew this guy really wanted it, and so it wound up being $10,000 more and a few other things in the contract. But the two agents were basically shut out.
Yeah.
And we were sitting there talking to each other over the phone and emails. Well, what's going to happen here? Who does what? And then actually the deal went through, but the selling agent, I'm sure, wasn't happy because the commission actually got reduced.
Oh.
And he agreed to it, but he wasn't
Interesting.
happy.
Yeah.
The clients aren't at this meeting, group presentation, correct?
No, not typically.
No.
I mean, the seller might be, right? So
Yeah,
that the
seller.
seller can hear the various offers.
Okay.
But the buyers, no.
Right.
But you can ask if you feel like, hey, I'd really like my buyer to show up. You can always ask, right? It's the worst they can say, no?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on multiple offers? No? Okay, I think we're going to talk about Jessica's question here for a few minutes before we start the next one, if you want to stick around. The next one is new REPC. We'll take like 5 minutes and stretch and eat more donuts and fruit and juice, just sugar ourselves up for the day. And if you don't need new REPC, you're welcome to go. We'll get a new spreadsheet. So thank you.
Thank you, yay.
Is there a sign-in sheet for this?
Yes.
It's over on the table. By the donuts.
And donuts. Oh,
Yeah. Both of them.
There's going to be another sign-in sheet for new REPC. Yes. Yes.
I never met you before. Dan. I'd shake your hand.
You got all kinds of. What's your name again? Sam Bell. Yeah.
Good, how are you? Also, your eyes just have been not that way. Is there a way that I can answer? I think it's I left a message. Other than that, I left a message.
How you doing?
I'm well, how are you?
What's your name?
It's Jessica.
Jessica. Hey.
Edward, no, Eddie's good. Yeah, Eddie's good, yeah. How's your year?
There's a bunch of chairs that are not being used, so take one off that.
They put a lot of chairs.
I like that there's good technical questions like that, you know, like 8.1C.
I'm like, yeah.
Around you.
Oh, yeah, no, I like it. Oh, yeah, no, I'm
I'm happy to
No, I know.
Mine was okay, but, you know, it's better than I expected, so. Listings that are doing like remodels before they do it. Bathrooms and stuff. I know.
Everyone's different. Everyone's different.
They had seen drawings, so I was like, where was the line? When did I cross it? And then I felt too pushy. My one finish,
So I'll let you know when he gets back in, one way or yeah, as soon as he gets back, I think he went up there and looked at it. I think he is changed it.
I'm not ill. Expires December 15th. So you know that exactly right. Get off. Even though I did so how you doing?
Well, I mean, what that tenant's gonna be terrified.
One time there's a fire, kind of big time, right time, I didn't want to without hearing about some pictures, and he came down from my but anyway, so before January 15th, I called him out and said, we need to release it, I want to sign it. And then he said, to tell you the truth, some foreign guys just walk out like, maybe out there, and they said,
my wife did
not really.
Yeah, she's not. kids think it's awesome. Yeah, my wife.
Therefore, I negotiate with so, is there anything we could do, we should do? That,
It's every other day. Is that
I realize
typical
like
with
after the
evolution?
partner, I should know after signing on.
It's like,
Yeah.
No, I worked with someone that asked why a client of hers, a friend of hers,
Unconditional
she needs,
the home was just so
he's not making any money, he's just sitting there.
anything we can do.
Hey, leave it.
I asked to look at
Good
references
bad times
and
pay.
I talked to my attorney looks at this way. I got it. Just happened. And
But why would I want to cut my own throat?
Your property manager, right? Sorry for interrupting.
No, you're good.
I just asked a question this morning about property manager.
Did
Here you are.
Yeah, run. Don't look back and run.
No, I just wanted to start paying me like a monthly commission on referral fees.
No, I'll start with that.
They told me that doesn't happen, but still want to get I know.
No, you're good. Thank you.
I want to talk to Sam too before you leave.
You're so popular, Sam.
Well, he's
Problem solved.
When Rob's out of town, I am helping.
Yeah, that's what I, but
Do you need to start?
No, I can afford it. Right now.
You got your pen?
Probably want to do is.
January 12th. Okay, January money from the. Okay.
Thank you. What was your question? Well, it's just about like the first referral and stuff like that. Do we get paid on
So
it?
that's 12.
Wasn't sure if we got paid monthly.
The main thing we need to look at is what we're going to go into now on this.
Cover what?
People are wanting to sell for people.
Anything like how do we know? How do we find out? What can we do? I did ask. Private offer is insured.
That's why I asked where Rob is.
These are extra books, but we don't have a rep sheet. Book? Not books. Or I don't have a rep sheet.
Well, I did have it ready.
But if it has outlines too.
Yeah, that's what I like.
So I can send you one.
I already have one of these. That's my second class.
Thank you very much. I made extras, but they're already gone too.
It turns out we had no
I know you need to answer, so I don't need to ask my question. I should be here for most of it. I know what you're saying.
Was that going for?
I don't want to mess up your I'm just. I read it and I'm like, that is because they're doing this why is this even in there if they're basically saying 20,000 is not refundable? I know.
Because I was
tying in financial reason.
Well, what I was thinking about is like Yeah, well, what I was thinking about is like, say I get a 4-bedroom.
Okay, good. It is a mess. Okay, so it's not just me.
I know what they're trying to do.
Because I was countering and I was like, well, I still don't
Thinking
get it.
about that.
And he's like, well, no, either way, I'm like, well, I don't like it. And I don't like the verbiage, so we need to change it. So it is weird. I'm not just not understanding it. Okay, thanks.
And once they get about that. All right, sounds good. Because I there's something appealing about that because they just get a little bit of it, and then you can get more. Say like you rent for $700. You know what I mean? Thanks, Bill.
And so they're like,
What's your verbal contract? What? 32 years. How old is that? You don't get all this crazy. Do anything.
oh yeah, way better than the first office.
I know.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, 3 votes, 3 variables, 7
Yeah. Brett, how are you? Yes.
And guess what? A lot of people. Yeah.
Thank you. Anything like that, I just met with Matt, everybody, anything like that. Feels awesome. I'm a phone guy. So, she's easy. What do I actually
Yeah, let's go to lunch. No, I wouldn't worry about it. Okay, are we all sugared up and hyper for the next 45 minutes?
Yes.
I mean 1 hour or something like that. Anyway, so exactly. So we're going to talk new REPC, and we're going to go a little backwards just for fun because today is one of those days. We're actually going to start with the new stuff about the financing condition. How many of you have written an offer on this new form? Nice. Okay, so we've at least kind of looked at it. What you have in front of you is the new REPC. The blue writing is the new additions that were made. Okay, there were deletions that we'll talk about, but I haven't shown them on this. Just the new stuff. Okay, but let's turn to. We're going to just continue a conversation we started in the last one. 8.3 financing condition. You're going to see a lot of blue here, right? So they've done some work, and I think they've done a lot of good work, and then there's some stuff that's confusing, which is what we're going to start with. So 8.3bi, buyer's right to cancel before the financing and appraisal deadline. Okay, and let's just read this together, and we'll talk about what they meant to say, and then we can talk about what we think they actually said. So if buyer in buyer's sole discretion, we love that language, right? Buyer's sole discretion is not satisfied with the terms and conditions of the loan, buyer may, now we got new stuff, after the due diligence deadline referenced in 24B, if applicable, cancel the REPC by providing written notice to seller no later than the finance and appraisal deadline referenced in section 24C, whereupon blank dollars of buyer's earnest money deposit shall be released to seller without the requirement of further written authorization from buyer, and the remainder of buyer's earnest money deposit shall be released to buyer without further written authorization from seller. Okay? What they were trying to do is carve out some time in the deal, right? And the timeline is buyer's due diligence deadline, the expiration of that, until finance and appraisal deadline, allowing the buyer to still cancel in their sole discretion. But if you write money, not percentage, there are people, I'm just waiting, I know it's going to happen where it's going to say 50% dollars, which is not a thing. Just to make sure.
That's a 50-cent piece.
That's a 50-cent piece. That's some British currency. We don't do that here. 50% dollars is not a thing. But let's say you have a $1,000 earnest money deposit you want to say half of that will become non-refundable, will go hard. You'd write $500 there, not 50%. But what they're trying to do is say, okay, due diligence has now expired. We want the buyer to continue to have that right to cancel for the finance condition, but we don't want it to be so easy where the buyer, there's no penalty to the buyer. So up until the finance and appraisal deadline, so that gap of time, buyer due diligence, the finance and appraisal, the buyer still has the right to cancel, but if we write a number in that, the seller gets to keep whatever that is.
If they cancel.
If they cancel between that period, right? And the way people are not reading it that way, okay? Jessica, would you like to give us the alternate reading?
Yeah, well, I think that they're using due diligence and financing. I feel like they should be using one of them, because how the contract I received was written is there was $40,000 earnest money. $20,000 of the earnest money is to become, so it said 8.3I, $20,000 to be increased to $20,000 to make the earnest money $40,000, and it is non-refundable after the due diligence deadline. So those are two conflicting things based on 8.3 and that.
Yeah.
Are they?
That is two different things, right? So the way I would read that is that the full earnest money of $40,000 becomes non-refundable after due diligence period, right?
Yeah.
And what they're trying to do here is something similar, where if you wrote that $40,000 in there, that is, that would become non-refundable.
Were they trying to increase earnest money?
They're doing both.
Oh.
So they're increasing as well as becoming non-refundable.
Yeah.
Wow.
Sean?
So to do that, you do an initial 20,000 in your earnest money, and then say that this 20,000 comes hard in 8.3I, and then in 8.4, that's where you do the additional 30.
Yeah, so if I were in those shoes, and we had a $20,000 earnest money deposit initially, right? And then we wanted to do an additional earnest money deposit of $20,000. But we were okay with the full amount becoming hard at due diligence. I would, let's see, in that new blank in 8.3 BI, let me just look here real fast.
Should we put 20,000 first?
Yeah, so you would put, you put the full 20,000 there
Or the I?
in I.
Which
How
was
would you do
written
that? What's
in
the
the
best
first
way to
section
do
for
it?
your earnest money, right?
Which would be the first, yeah, so the first
And on the
section in
four,
2.
And on the 4 you put the
And then
earnest.
8.4 you'd put
the
another
rest of it.
20,000, right?
Yeah.
And then would you use a,
And
I have
use
to
an
think through
addendum.
this. Thanks for putting me on the spot in front of everybody and on camera. Then you probably do an addendum saying the
Yeah,
full earnest money
explain.
deposit becomes.
So that's what I ended up
Total of
doing.
$40,000.
Yeah.
Basically
Clarify.
removing, just
I'll do that.
not addressing 8.3, because I don't see why 8.3 is even being wrapped up
Do
in
a
it.
counter
No.
and
I
just.
just said that the 20,000 of the 40
Yeah.
is becoming non-refundable after due
Yeah,
diligence.
so you
Yes.
do a counter offer.
And that's a good counter, right? That's very clear
Yeah,
about what we're trying to do,
You
right?
need to verify.
And in this case, if they were meaning only 20 of the 40 to become non-refundable after due diligence, right? But okay, This is a lot of fun. So in section 2 we have $20,000 earnest money. In section 8.4 we have an additional 20,000, right? So you'd write 20, 20, right? And then here, if you only wanted 20 of the total 40 to become non-refundable, in that new blank I'd write $20,000. And then we wouldn't have had to have some weird addendum and counteroffer to try to sort out what they meant to say. Right? Does that make sense? Okay. Yes?
Get back to buyer's condition purchase 8, and then we go to 8.1. And we really want to focus on the appraisal condition or the finance condition, which is generally later than due diligence.
Mm-hmm. We hope.
We would, yeah, I would want to. So in 8.1, you'd still want to check is, even though you want to focus, you can check both ises in both places.
Yes.
You can't do either or. I mean, you can do either or, but you want to have a chance after due diligence. You want to have a chance after finance and appraisal. So you check
Yes.
is on both of those.
Yes. And just to note, so that blank where some of this earnest money becomes non-refundable is only a cancellation based on finance, right? They can still cancel based on appraisal and get a full refund, but there's an additional step to that cancellation. You actually have to provide a copy of the appraisal report, right? Now, if you want your buyer to have the same flexibility that they did last year, where it's like, yeah, you can cancel based on finance for whatever reason, and there is no penalty, you write 0 in that $. Yeah.
So it's designed to help learn if the buyers are serious.
Oh, absolutely, right? This is buyer going to put skin in the game at some point.
It saves time.
Absolutely. And this is the prediction we made last year when we first started looking at this, and I'd love to get your feedback. But our prediction was that this would be the source of more counteroffers. That on the seller side, you're going to want to sit down with your seller when you're presenting the offer and say, hey, look, they wrote 0 there. Do you really want it to be 0, seller, or do you want it to be $20,000? Just to go with that example, or $40,000, or $8,000, or whatever. And the seller's likely going to go, yeah, yes, I want the buyer to be committed at that point, and if they're not committed, I want some money, right? So that would be a counteroffer. Counter 8.3bi, so that whatever dollar figure is non-refundable after due diligence. Okay? Have you been seeing counters like that? Yes?
There's going to be now.
Thanks for agreeing with me. I'm so excited. That was our prediction. But there will be now, right? Another thing that finance did is at the bottom, 8.3b, and then little 2i, this is what happens after finance and appraisal expires, but the buyer can't get funding. Has anybody ever had that happen? Right? The buyer lost their job, they bought a new car because they were so excited to have it go in the garage of the new house, now they can't get the new house. They filed bankruptcy, something happens, and now, even though they were approved and everything was good, at finance and appraisal deadline, before settlement deadline, the bank will not fund. Okay? It happens. What's nice is this, they added some language there that says buyer, right at the bottom, that buyer shall not be obligated to purchase the property, right? And buyer or seller may cancel the REPC, blah, 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 blah. What's nice about that, it didn't used to say that. Didn't say buyer had the right at that point to cancel. And these are the calls I would get. I'd get calls from listing agents, from sellers directly, and they would say, hey, buyer says they can't fund, I don't care. I want to force them to buy the house. So if we go to section 16, which hasn't been changed, but is the remedies section, the seller would have 3 remedies, right? Specific performance, meaning we're going to force you to finish the deal, refund or forfeiture of the earnest money, or return the earnest money and whatever damages, whatever that means, okay? So we'd get calls from seller, go, great, we want specific performance. I'd say, wow, that would be awesome. How do you force someone without money to pay you money? It's hard. That's not a case I want. That's too hard. I like hard cases, but that's crazy, right? And then the seller would say something like this, well, then I want $50,000 because that's what I'm damaged. And why are they damaged like that? You know, that was always my question. It was like, well, because I was supposed to close on this house and now I can't because this house isn't closing. It's a domino effect, right? And it's beautiful for attorneys. We love domino because we've got hundreds of lawsuits out of one deal. It's like the best. It's the gift that keeps on giving. But the problem is it's not realistic, right? These guys can't even buy your house. They only had $1,000 earnest money. What makes you think they're going to have $50,000 to pay you for your damages? And how are we going to prove that? Now what they've done in this next piece, in the little 3, is they've said, in this case, so it's very narrow, very limited. Buyer can't get funding after finance and appraisal deadline has expired, so buyer has to cancel. They now have permission to cancel, right? And this next piece says, if it's canceled because of that, the seller's remedy is just the earnest money. So this land of milk and honey for attorneys where there's millions of lawsuits from one single real estate transaction is now gone.
Which box was
Sad
that?
for me. What?
Which one was that?
8.3B, earnest money deposits, the little 3 little I, baby Roman numeral 3, whatever you want to call it. That one. Yeah.
So I have a situation right now where I have a client, I represent the seller. The buyer had a contingency on their home to sell another home out of state. It fell through. They've gone way past their time to cancel based on the contingency. I think they have 4 days to let me know and then 4 days to cancel. They're past that part. We're past finance and appraisal. They're not going to be able to qualify for the loan without selling this house. And we're supposed to close at the end of the month. In section number 2 at the very end, it says where seller may cancel the REPC by providing written notice to the other party, and it references back to 3.2, which is the closing date.
Yep.
Can we, because we know they absolutely cannot get the loan at this point, can we cancel it and put it back on the market, or do I have to wait until they default by not closing on the close date, and then the next day I can put it back in?
Yeah, so how do we know they can't get the loan, right? So
they've told us.
So they've said, hey, we can't get
get the loan. They want to wait until the 30th and then try
Just-
to do like
just
a
in
time
case?
clause, just because they're a pain in my butt.
Oh,
And they're going to try to do a time clause at the end. We're trying to either do a time clause now or
Yeah.
cancel and let us put it back active.
So if they've told us, and hopefully we have it in writing, that
I
they
have it,
cannot
yes.
get the
Yeah.
loan, right? Then yes, then that
So
would
we
trigger
can
the
cancel
seller's
on
right
them
to
because
cancel.
they aren't, and
Yep.
we would still retain earnest
And
money.
we would retain earnest money.
Well, doesn't it say right there in the one we were just looking at, that says the buyer or seller may cancel REPC
Yes.
providing
Yeah.
written
So that's-
Yep. And the key is just how would a seller know the buyer cannot get that loan or has failed to get the loan, which is up there just after 24C. So if you have something in writing, that's pretty good.
Officer said something, yeah.
Okay, let's go back and then we'll come up to you. Yeah.
Okay.
Do the texts count yet?
Text count.
As written
in writing.
notice.
As it is in writing, right? I would send an email or something just saying, hey, just to verify, I got this text that says this, correct? Something like that, just extra padding. Good question. Okay, yes.
Same question.
Oh,
Good job.
you guys are so good. You're all on the same wavelength. It's like you do stuff together.
Hive mentality.
Okay, any questions on finance condition?
Well, that's the first time I've seen the seller's right to cancel based on the buyer's financing.
Isn't that fun?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like he gets an email saying they can't get it, they could just send a cancellation over saying, we're canceling because you can't.
We're canceling, please send us over the earnest money, right?
Yeah.
Because that's what the next piece says.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But in the old REPC, if the seller cancels, the buyer could sue them for damages, right? So that wording has changed, so now can a seller cancel a REPC at any point?
No.
Okay.
This is very limited, right?
Okay, so
And
just
this-
pertaining to.
Just after finance and appraisal, the buyer cannot get the loan,
Right,
which is why I asked the question, what evidence do we have? 'Cause
okay.
We're gonna get shaky. And
So the-
sellers like to think they have as much right as buyer does to cancel, and
Right.
they don't, except for one little narrow weird thing that rarely happens.
And will they have it on the cancellation thing now? Because it seems mostly just for a buyer on cancellation.
It is mostly for buyer cancellation.
There's a
This is-
little box that says other and a
Other,
line.
yep, other and the line. Now, as a brokerage, I've been working with Rob and Matt to develop a completely different type of cancellation form. That's a lot simpler and really doesn't have to tell you what, just you go, we're canceling, period. And then as long as it's before a deadline, because it doesn't say nothing in here says you have to cancel and tell them why. Right? But we get calls constantly from agents where they've accidentally checked the wrong box. I had this happen. Oh, I meant to check due diligence. I was going too fast. I hit finance. And now there's a problem. Or, I meant to check finance because it was after due diligence, but I checked due diligence. We don't actually have to say that. It's just we don't have to provide closure. We can just say we cancel. Oh, and we're before a deadline. So
But
we
on this
cancel.
one, it seems like you kind of want to be specific. We're the seller canceling because you can't do it based on 8.3.
Based on 8.3, B2,
and 3.
And 3. Yes. Yeah.
Would seller's agent have to demand some kind of written proof from the company or anything, or just on the word of the buyer?
If the buyer tells me I can't get the loan, I feel like that's good enough. And if you want the official rule of evidence, it's called admission by party opponent, right? They've admitted they can't do it.
Right.
It's good enough for a court, it's good enough for me.
I'm sorry for getting hung about
No,
this,
you're
but
fine.
you can as a seller, you can cancel and get the earnest money after
finance.
After finance.
After finance and appraisal, yes.
Oh,
If they can't get the loan.
Great.
I'm glad we rocked your world today.
So what if it
We
has
should just be
something
done
to
now.
do
More
with
donuts and let's go.
FHA?
So what if it has to do with something with
Mandatory
FHA?
clause says that
Oh, you can't keep their.
the earnest money goes back to the buyer at all times.
Then that's different, right?
It's a
If
different
there's
contract.
if there's a different addendum that changes that, it's a whole different one.
supersedes that.
Yes.
So, so pertaining to that FHA mandatory clause that some of the lenders will send over, I found out that can be a prior to funding condition. So I never let my sellers sign that document because then it allows the buyers to back out and get their earnest money for any reason up until the day of closing. So I just have my seller sign it at
At
closing.
closing.
Mhm.
Fun.
Which one?
That was worth the price of
Which-
it.
which
The
bit?
FHA mandatory stuff, clause, thingamajigger, yes.
Within the FHA, they have a window to get out anyway.
Yeah, that's true, right? Let's be honest. With this, we have all these windows to get out, so
Right.
it's not really that funny.
Okay, anyway.
Yes.
If you're in a contract where the finance and appraisal deadline is coming up, you can also write an addendum for the buyer to the seller to extend that deadline and bump the other closing or settlement deadline down too.
Yeah.
If it's just a bank problem, if the bank is giving you, or the underwriter, then you kind of put it out another week on this.
Absolutely.
But you have to get the buyer, the seller to agree to that. And if they don't, then you got some other can
Oh, absolutely. Well,
then they can cancel the contract.
that's a really good segue to this next slide,
Yeah,
which
yeah,
has
yeah.
nothing to do.
I'm thinking far ahead.
You're way ahead. Except for this is a whole different topic. This is about final inspection. Okay. So paragraph 11. We're doing the last two slides, and then we're going back to the first 15. It's fun. But hey, we aim to please, and we had a special request, so we did it. Okay, so paragraph 11. Used to have an 11.1 and an 11.2, if we recall. And this is about the final walkthrough, right? So we're walking through, we're looking to make sure that all of the due diligence concerns have been addressed, and that the property is in the same, it's the same thing as what we saw when we went under contract, right? 11.2, when it used to be there, told us what to do if there was a problem during final walkthrough, right? There was an escrow. It said we're going to create an escrow, we're going to do this stuff. And then it also said section 11 survives closing, okay? And throughout this document, and you'll see it right up at the bottom of 10.3, section 10.3 shall survive closing. There's a reason it says that. So in contract law, there's a law, it's called doctrine, it sounds so formal, but there's a doctrine called the merger doctrine, which says if you have a contract to do another contract, the minute that new contract is signed, the old contract is worthless, right? That new contract is a deed. So everything here becomes part of the deed, right? Well, if it says it survives closing, that means we can still take care of things after the deed is signed and recorded, right? Well, final walkthrough, you're kind of at the end. Last time I checked, it's like right there. Now, when they removed 11.1, they also removed this thing that said Section 11 survives closing.
Okay.
So now the question is, when you walk through and you see a problem, how do we address it? Because if we close, if I'm the seller, I'm going to go, hey, quick, let's close. Why? Because we're never going to have to address it because of merger, right? If you're a buyer, how do we protect our buyers? Okay, so we don't have escrow. There's no survival language. Okay, so we go on. Here's 3 strategies. There's actually 5 I'm going to give you. The other 2 aren't posted because they're cheap and they're easy and I don't make any money off of them. But I'll tell you what they are. You have to write them down yourselves. So the first said, hey, what about an instruction not to fund? Hey, escrow officer, we got a problem. Don't fund. Don't, we got to, use the title company as our ally to get things done. And escrow officers say, heck no. Because this contract says we have 4 days, I think it's 4 days or 3 days to fund and close after settlement. So that's a problem. But the escrow instructions they get from banks are 1 day. And they love their banks. They love you. Oh, they love you a lot, right? But they really love the banks too. So they're not going to go against that. My favorite, okay, write that down, star it, Sam's favorite, emergency lawsuit. Love this one. Absolutely love it. My kids want a new boat this summer, and this is going to help me get there. Okay? And this is why. We could sue before settlement, and then we don't have the issue of merger because we sued you before we closed. Right? The problem for your buyers, that's really expensive. The idea, if there's a real problem, is the sellers are going to end up paying. But in reality, it's going to take time. If anybody's ever been involved in a lawsuit, you know they don't get fixed the next day. You know that they can drag on, in some cases, for years. Okay? That really not a great option for you. Great option for me. Bad option for you. Bad option for your buyers. And if I'm in your shoes, I'm going to say, bad one. What about extending the settlement deadline? We just had the comment up here. So if there's a problem with funding, what about extending the settlement deadline? Same issue here. Final walkthrough, we see a problem. Why not send over an addendum extending the settlement deadline? Well, the reason is the seller has to sign off. And if I'm a savvy seller, I'm going to go, I'm not signing off because the minute we close, I'm home free. Right? I'm going to use that legal loophole to my favor. The reason everybody hates attorneys, I'm going to do it, right? So here's the 2 that you can do. Actually, I'm just going to skip because we spent a lot of time. I'm going to skip to the one that you should do. Blank addendum. You write, Section 11 survives closing. Nice. And then send it over with your contract. 1 sentence means my kids, my poor deprived kids, no boat, no new boat.
This year.
No new boat this year. I'm going to have to do a lot more work for other people. So anyway, no, right? Section 11 survives closing. No more problems, right? And the seller's not anticipating any problems, so they're going to sign up front, and it's all going to be good, okay? So there's the 1 sentence that ruins my life. You're welcome. All right, let's go back.
Sam,
Yes.
I have a question real quick.
Yes.
I think I know the answer, but what if you just type it like in dot loop right there? On all
What if
the
you
ones
just
you
type
use?
it in dot loop? Yes, and you could.
I mean, they're not gonna see it, and we don't have to address it. I mean, I don't know if that's.
You'd be adding it to a form, and
Okay.
your license allows you to fill in blanks,
So
not
you can't
create
do it.
forms. But I just do a blank addendum with everyone. It'll just save you. There's a couple other things we were gonna hit as a brokerage and just do a form one for everybody just to print off and use. And I'm blanking out what the other stuff was, but as we go through it, I might remember. So, okay, so just general observations. We already kind of touched on this. The old REPC, the needle was pinned towards the buyer, right? Penalty for canceling for due diligence, finance, it didn't really matter. As long as you're within the deadlines, there was actually no penalty because you got your earnest money back. So this one, as we've already started to see with finance, is pushing the needle back more towards the seller a little bit. Still a lot of flexibility for the buyer. So let's go back and look at 2.2. We've got this new paragraph in the purchase price, which is actually like a condition, which I think is weird. Okay, and it says, buyer's ability to purchase the property to obtain the loan referenced in 2.1c above, and any portion of the cash in 2.1e is not. Check box. Every time you're writing an offer, you have to check a box on this provision, right? So that's going to change how you do your job. You've got to talk to your buyer. Hey buyer, let's see. We've written down earnest money of $1,000. Haha, that's real earnest. You know, you're going to get a new loan for, you know, whatever, and you're going to put $200,000 down as cash. Where's that $200,000 coming from?
Gotta sell my house.
Right? Got to sell my house. Oh, then I have to check is. Right? Any portion of that cash, you have to check is. If any portion of their credit worthiness to get the new loan requires the sale of that house, you got to check is. Right? I love this. I think it's forced the question so we can have the conversation. It's the next part, the very last sentence that terrified me when I first read this. And the reason being is there are agents, the same agents who are going to write 50% dollars in the finance condition are also going to forget this. They're going to check is, and then they're going to forget to attach the subject to sale of buyer's property addendum, which this says the minute you check is, this is not a 6-page contract, it's an 8-page contract, right? The subject to sale is 2 pages, at least last time I looked. Okay, so if I get a copy of this and I see is, and it's only the 6 pages, or it's missing the subject to sale addendum, or something that talks about that, I'm not going to present it. I'm going to call the other side and say, you gave me an incomplete contract, send the rest, and then I'll present it. If we need to change the acceptance deadline, so be it. But I can't present my client with part of a contract. It doesn't make any sense, right? If you check is, make sure you actually do the subject to sale addendum. Don't be the guy who writes 50% dollars, right? Yes?
Are we still going to go over section 1.1, the included items?
Oh yeah.
Okay, because I have a solar panel question for you.
Good. Let's do that right now. Again, please, we're taking requests. We'll go back to earnest money in a second. So inclusions. So they've done a couple of things. You see only just minor little blue words in inclusions. One of which is solar panels, which is a huge problem because, ask your question.
Because some people have loans, some people have leases. How are we conveying this to the buyer? So was I right to take an addendum and give the explanation of who's paying for these and how they're being transferred over to the buyer?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Did everybody catch that? The problem with solar panels is nobody really pays cash for them. Even the guys who could don't. And they're not always even owned. Okay, so let's go look at the very first, it's actually the second clause in the first sentence of 1.1. It says, unless excluded here, this sale includes the following items if presently owned and in place. Owned and in place. I hear that all the time when there's problems with what was there and is now not there. If your buyer's walking into a house and they look up and they see solar panels on the roof, they are thinking what?
Comes with the house.
Comes with the house. I'm buying a house with solar. Yes. Okay? The problem is they might not be owned. They may be leased. Okay? They may be financed. There's 2 ways they finance. They finance with a security interest, so there's a lien. It's just fine. It's going to get cleared at closing. Escrow officer's going to pay it off. Everything's going to be dandy, and they are going to get a house with solar. The other one is it's financed, but it's unsecured. It's like a credit card. There's no evidence to that buyer or to a title company that there's a loan on those solar panels, right? We need to be asking these questions, both of our sellers and of the listing agent. And those solar panels, awesome. Do you lease, or does the seller lease? Do they have them financed? If so, is it unsecured? And if they say, yeah, they're financed, but they're unsecured, that's great. We just need to tell our escrow officer, hey, you need to get a payoff for these solar panels. Because that finance company is going to be grumpy about 3 months after this deal happens and they haven't gotten a payment, okay? And then your buyer's gonna be grumpy if they show up to take their solar panel back, okay? And the same thing with the lease. If it's leased, get a copy of the lease so that the buyer can look at it and figure out what's gonna happen. Now, if the seller's like, hey, these are excluded, the solar panels do not come with the house, which has happened already, then we need to make sure it's an exclusion on the MLS, and we need to make sure it makes it as an exclusion into the contract, okay? Oh, wow, hands galore. Jessica beat everybody, so we'll start at the back and work on it.
I added something to my exclusive right to sell that just asks those questions, and I also included Utopia. Because if you're in Murray, I mean, it's like $20,000, $30,000, and it's never addressed, and your sellers never tell you.
Yeah, it's true.
That's it.
Thank you, okay. All right.
So, what if nobody addresses it? The sellers think that it's their property and they rip it off at closing.
That's what happened.
Your buyers are left with
That's what happened.
a really nasty roof.
A really nasty mess, right? That has happened already, done.
And how did you resolve it?
Now let's think about this. So the buyer is getting whatever's included. So if it's not excluded and it's presently owned and in place, and in the case that I'm talking where it happened, it wasn't necessarily owned, but it was financed and it was paid. And the seller took them anyway. The buyer could go back to the seller and say, hey, I'm not getting, I'm not getting. So let's go back. So that's final inspection. You're walking through, where is it? Or after you go, but where is it? So we want things to survive closing, and the seller ended up having to fix it. Now, if you're on the buyer's side and it's excluded, that should like send off alarm bells. What is this roof going to look like when those solar panels are gone? I need repairs for my buyer, right?
I had a seller flat out refuse to, because I told them in our counter offer that they were excluding it. We countered saying, then we want a licensed roofer to go out and repair and inspect the roof, and they flat out refused. They were like, no, the solar company will do it. No,
No, they won't.
Let's not have solar companies repair our roofs, okay? Just, yes. Did you stab one? Who else had their hand?
Oh, no, it was just,
okay.
the thing was, and if they're going to remove them, the roof needs to be repaired.
Oh, absolutely,
That was all
yes.
I was gonna say.
I have solar panels that are financed on my home. Should I ever sell? I don't know if the appraisers are giving extra value for that yet or not. I don't think they are. Can you exclude it here and then include it later with an addendum or other place here?
Yes.
Buyer will pay for the balance, 50-50 split of the balance. We'll both pay off half. That would be a good counter.
Yes, yes, absolutely. So the question is, the solar panels, you're the seller, you're working for the seller, the solar panels are financed. Really, the appraisals are not being adjusted yet, right? There's some talk that maybe this year, but it's so, there's not enough comps to support that being a real adjustment. So it's very minor, it's like $1,000 or $2,000 is what I've heard. Very little, not even close to the price of solar panels.
20,000.
So it's financed. The seller doesn't want to have to take the full hit. Can you allocate some of that payoff to the buyer? And the answer is yes. In an addendum, you could say, hey, you know, there's $20,000 balance on these solar panels. Buyer agrees to pay $10,000 of the payoff for the solar panels. That's fine. Yeah. The next thing is water softeners. They've been moved up. It's no longer a checkbox. I guess we figured, oh, water softeners are actually plumbed into the house. It's a fixture. We bumped them up. Same problem with water softeners. They can be leased. Same set of questions, same set of thoughts. All right. Now we've got what the little nerdy attorney in me has wondered about for a long time. When you mount a TV to a wall, does it become a fixture?
Yes.
Yes. Right? So they've clarified that for us. So they said, not necessarily the TV, but the mounting bracket. Right? The mounting bracket is now included with the house and is a fixture.
Otherwise remove it.
Yeah. Yes.
Or exclude it.
Or exclude it if you don't want it.
Garage door openers. You
Yes.
know, our new cars, we program our cars to our garage, we lose the transmitters. Do we have to provide the buyer at least one transmitter with the closing?
If it's here,
Write it down.
I would say yes. I would exclude it if you've lost them. Of course, at the same place, it's if presently loaned and in place on the property. Yeah, here's the thing. We're trying to eliminate arguments. I mean, that's what we're doing with the solar panels, water softeners, what we're going to talk about, the TV mounting brackets in a second. It's trying to eliminate issues and arguments. So if they've lost the transmitters, I just say, hey, look, they're lost. And maybe you, in a county, go, garage door transmitters were lost long ago, so they will not be included. Something like that, so there's no question. So I've got the mounting brackets that are there. The fun thing about mounting brackets, not everybody wants a TV over the fireplace. Not everybody wants a TV in every room, like a friend of mine has, right? You need to prep your buyers. You're gonna have a big ugly bracket there above your fireplace, right? Or if your seller has a bracket like this, which is on hydraulics and moves and was really expensive and really perfect for that television, they want to take it. Needs to be an exclusion. Then from the buyer's side, similar to roof with solar panel, we need repairs done to that wall because this isn't a little screw nail hole. It's like a big old bolt or bracket thing. It's going to be a mess, right? So it's something to talk about. Now with your sellers, it's the mounting brackets, which typically are two pieces, right? The piece bolted to the wall and the piece screwed into the back of the TV. They need to take that thing off the back of the TV and leave it. So what good's a mounting bracket? Half of a mounting bracket. It's not good, right? So there you go, mounting brackets. Now this has been happening. Let's see. Only got the nest, right? Is that a fixture?
Yes.
Is that part of the house when it's sold? Has anybody had their sellers take it?
Yep. But
Is
we
this
put
a
it in
yes?
the contract.
But you put it in the contract, bingo. It's a fixture. It better be an exclusion if your seller's going to take it. It's happening more and more. I'm not surprised. They're fancy. They're fun. It's not an addition. It's just something we're talking about. Make sure it's excluded if they want to take it, or that when before it's even showed, they swap it out for the cheap one.
Same with that Ring doorbell.
Yeah, the Ring doorbell. There's a lot of stuff.
Security
A
cameras.
lot of smart home stuff people want to take with them, right? They just need to make sure that if they are, it's specifically excluded. Okay? Let's talk real quick about what they've done with HOA stuff. We had this argument, yes, I mentioned in the last class that I had to meet with the seller yesterday who was upset at a lot of things. She was really upset that she'd paid a transfer fee to the HOA. And she tried to blame it on the agent and say the agent was responsible to pay her back for that. I didn't follow the logic. What was really fun though is when I pulled out the REPC and I saw that they'd used a new REPC. I said, bravo, and this is why. Because we now deal with HOA transfer fees. If you look at 4.3C, it's a brand new paragraph that deals specifically with fees that are due upon the transfer of a home in an HOA. Okay? Those can be pretty hefty. Has anybody sold anything in Daybreak? What, 0.5% out there?
1.5 on one of them.
That's what?
1.5.
1.5. Now that's fun. So there's a statute that says if you're, let's see, here we go. There's a statute that says that the reinvestment fee, it's called a reinvestment fee now, not a transfer fee. So the legal term is reinvestment fee. May not exceed 0.5% of the sale price unless it's a community of more than 500 homes or 500 acres. So if it's 500 homes or 500 acres, there is no limit. None. 1.5%.
Those are the
Extra
guys
closing
that,
costs.
yeah, those
Crazy.
They can afford the lobbyists.
They can afford the lobbyists. True. I was there. I was at the hearings on this one, and yeah. Anyway, there's some stuff up in Park City, Summit County, Port of Wasatch County, by Jordanelle, where it's very big communities, and it's a percent. And your starter home up there is like 1.5 in these communities. 1% of 1.5 is another big chunk of change at closing, right? The nice thing is here, we now have the opportunity to allocate who pays that with some check boxes. Buyer, seller, split equally, other. Now if I'm in your shoes and I am working with a buyer, I'm going to universally check seller, right? And that's what happened in the deal we were talking with the seller about last night. Is the buyer checked seller, the seller accepted, the seller got assessed the $500, which at closing was mad and wanted the agent to pay for it. I don't know why. Well, I do know why. They're a little cuckoo, but
Oh, no, and Mr. Chairman, point, couldn't she say, well, he should have given me a heads up about that?
that's kind of her point, is he should have told me about that, right? He should have told me that this was a thing. So that just goes back to, are you going through these offers with your clients and saying, hey, in this paragraph, you're saying yes to this. In this paragraph, you're saying yes to this. In this paragraph, you're saying yes to this. But she says he did, he says he did. Fun times for me.
Most likely, I mean, those fees, the buyer really needs to pay for it. Right?
So the buyer, right?
Most likely.
Yeah. And if the seller wants it to be the buyer, but it's check seller, there needs to be a counteroffer.
That would be a business.
That'd be a business decision. I've got up here some questions to ask the HOA. There's another piece up above, special assessments. HOAs are beautiful creatures. They never save money, right? They know that in their CC&Rs, they can just specially assess. So if we have a problem, why charge everybody $110 a month and save $10 a month for future problems? Let's just assess everybody $60,000 when it's time to do a big fix, right? Which is what they do. So right, 4.2, you see homeowners association is now spelled out. It used to just say HOA, but you can also seller buyer split equally, check the box. I would like to check seller. And here's some questions you should ask, right? You want to ask them of the listing agent, and then when you get the seller's disclosures, you want to ask them of the HOA contact. Have any special assessments been approved? If so, how much? When are they due? Is there a reinvestment or transfer fee, and how much is that, right? So that our buyer knows exactly what's going on. I also asked I swore I'd never buy an HOA. Not a huge fan, but I live in one now. Well, before I moved in, I called and asked these questions, and I also asked, how strictly do you enforce the rules? Because I know that I'm a little sloppy when it comes to following the rules. I know the rules. I can defend you if you break the rules. I might not live by the rules, right? All the time. I do live by most of them. And they said not very, and I said great, maybe we'll get along. And I moved in, and it's been great. And now I'm on the board, and we don't enforce anything. It's awesome. So, but I won't tell you where I live. I don't want you to come in and break the rules.
We can look you up.
It's true, you can. I don't live far from you. Any questions about HOAs before we move on? Yes?
So there's the transfer fee, but there are other fees that are related with HOAs. Is that included as well?
Yeah, so the other fees. So this deals just with the transfer of title. Now some of the other fees sometimes are like the monthly assessments, which will be prorated. Sometimes there's past due stuff that's getting picked up and the seller's having to pay. Sometimes there's like condos, or there's a million different little
Like
things.
to set up a new account or something like that.
That should be part of this.
Right? Because I
Yes.
had an argument with one
I'm,
about that.
I'm sure you did. The reinvestment fee is for the administrative cost. So if I pulled up this statute that talks about these fees, it's to cover administrative expenses associated with the transfer of the property, which would be new account setup. Yeah.
So even, I mean, HOAs nowadays, they even charge you to get the payoff statement, like a regular mortgage. So would that be included in your
No.
reinvestment? No, because that's
No.
not transferring.
That's different, and that's a whole different thing, and there's a limit on how much they can charge, but they can charge for that. We love HOAs, look at all these hands, okay. Yes, we're gonna go bounce like this, okay?
If you're representing a buyer and there's an HOA, I would suggest, I'm sure nobody here looks only at the app on your phone. Because I had an HOA and I had the transfer fee spelled out in the agent remarks. Well, the buyer that came in didn't read the agent remarks, so he said it didn't pull up on his phone. So he said if my buyer would have known that, we wouldn't have offered on the house. And I said, you know what, then you should have read the whole, everything.
Listing.
The
That
whole
would be
listing
called a
before you make
breach
an
of your
offer.
fiduciary duties.
He ended up having to pay for it.
Ouch, that's fun, yes. Let's see, yes, Tammy.
Okay, so we have, like in some condos that we're investing in, there's a reinvestment fee, which is 0.5%. plus a master transfer fee, plus your normal HOA fees. And they're spelled out in the offer. I mean, that Edge Homes creates their own REPC, basically.
Yes, that's, well,
Are there boxes to check on that?
so,
Is
No,
seller,
you
buyer?
don't get a
so
check
the
box.
buyer gets it
It's
all,
defined.
Buyer gets
right?
it all unless you
You
negotiate.
can or with the seller. There are those. Now, that's something to be aware of. Not every HOA is just, not every house is in an HOA is just in one HOA. Let's just take Traverse Mountain. Traverse? I'm probably killing that place with the Cabela's down south, next to Adobe. Okay? They've got a couple HOAs in there. They have the one that controls the entire community, the master, and then each neighborhood has their own, and there's fees for both. So, those are questions that we should be asking as agents, right? Yeah.
Okay, you call your seller's agent on behalf of your buyer, ask them, are there any of these fees? Yeah, I don't know. Then you take it upon yourself to call the HOA and ask for those.
You can try, and the HOA doesn't necessarily have to tell you, but
Well, that's part of the disclosures thing.
that is part of the disclosures.
And
Yep.
if they leave that blank and it's all vague, then you could be into a real problem.
The seller could,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Both the buyer too, if it's vague the way it was, check box, this, that, or the other. I try not to show people HOAs.
I love it. At the back, yes.
So, I don't know if anybody's ever ran into this, but I just had a question on, and maybe we can answer that. I have one HOA that told me that, the seller was gonna pay the transfer fees to the buyer, you know what I mean, transfer fees for him. And when I called the HOA, they said, yes, transfer fees $150, but there's another $200 that we charge the buyers, to put it in their name. And so, at closing, I don't know why the HOA decided they wanted me to, they said you need to make sure that the seller pays it, not, or the buyer pays it, not the seller. But I thought that was part of the transfer fee, but they said no, because in our conditions, it says the buyer pays it. But I thought transfer fee is all of that, and that should be the whole seller. And so, I'm just an assistant, but I have my license too, but the end of the agents decided to let them split it, the buyer paid their part and the other. But my mind says, no, that should have all been the seller. So I just wanna make sure so that,
I would be on the same page as you. Like any kind of buyer setup fee, anything like that, I would say is reinvestment fee. Why would I say it? Because the Utah State Legislature said it. Okay? And so, I'm not that original. But I would say yes. And then I don't really care what the HOA documents say. When we have a contract, we're shifting that responsibility, right? I mean, the HOA cares that they get paid.
Right.
Somebody has to pay.
I don't know why she.
That's
was
what's
so
important to
into
them.
it, 'cause
I
I'm
don't know.
like,
They get weird. We love them. Let's move real quick. We've got a couple new terms. We'll just go over these fast. You have long-term lease or rental agreements, and short-term rental bookings. These are new terms, right? It's not just a lease isn't a lease anymore. The difference is whether it's 30 days or more, or less than 30 days. Long-term lease or rental agreements are 30 days or more. Short-term rental bookings are like the nightly rentals, like a VRBO or an Airbnb, right? And where you're going to find it is in sections 6.17 and 12. 6.1 says the lease follows title. So if you take title, you take it subject to that lease. 7 talks about disclosures, which we'll hit real fast for 2 minutes. And then 12 says that you can't make changes, the seller can't make changes to these agreements in the term of long-term lease or rental after it's accepted, and short-term rental bookings after the seller disclosure deadline. Okay? 7 requires the seller, so if we go to 7, and we'll look at that pretty quick. 7 in 7F, it's like the old version. We have to provide copies of unexpired leases, but now that's only for long-term leases, so 30 days or more. If you go to G, it says with a short-term rental booking, they only have to give us the schedule, not the lease, not the rental agreement. All I have to do is say when people are going to be in the property. Okay? So as a buyer's agent, if you get that, you're going to want to ask, hey, seller, I need more information, right? I want to know how much it's renting for. I want to know the terms and conditions of the rental. I want to know this stuff so we understand what the buyer is getting into. What's interesting is even though the contract doesn't say they have to give it to you, the minute you ask, it becomes what's known as a material issue for that buyer. And the Supreme Court of Utah said, hey, sellers in Utah have a duty to disclose any information that is material to the buyer in making their decision to buy. The minute you ask, it's now told them it's material to the buyer in making their decision to buy. They're obligated to give it to you. So you say, oh, short-term rental booking. Some of you are going, I'll never see those. If you sell anything in Park City, you'll probably see one. If you sell anything in the canyons, you'll probably see one. Any kind of recreational property, you'll probably see one, right? And you want a copy of the agreements, the actual agreements, okay? A couple of things, just real quick, on sellers' disclosures that they've added. Lead-based paint, it's no longer an addendum. It's never made sense to me. It's now a disclosure, okay? So the seller just gives it. You've got, let's go down to the one I think is going to be the most interesting. Written notice of any claims and or conditions. This is J. Written notice of any claims and or conditions known to seller relating to environmental problems and building or zoning code violations. This is why I think that's interesting. In Utah, we do it ourselves. We remodel. I have an unfinished basement. Why would I call a contractor? The Home Depot's only a mile away. I can do that, right? I'm good at electrical work because I know I don't touch the white and the black wire at the same time. What's so hard about this, right?
Unless you see sparks.
Unless you see sparks, right? People do this all the time, okay? Now what this says is if a seller has done that, has done something that would require a building permit without getting a permit, or has done something that violates zoning or building code, they have to disclose that to the buyer. Okay, sometimes you don't know. But just recently, there was a flipper who came up from California, bought a place in Provo, and added a second story. I don't know how he did it because he didn't get a building permit. How do you get away with it? Then when he met with listing agents to sell, he said, I don't want to tell the buyer that I didn't pull a permit on this. Okay, obviously, now somebody like that would have to disclose. Okay, now you get people going, well, how do I advise my seller if they've done that, right? You just say, hey, I did this, I finished the basement and didn't pull a permit. Let the buyer figure it out from there, right? It's kind of like roof leaks, right? Had a roof leak, I got it fixed.
Now, what's the situation for the realtor? Do they need to ask? You should report to the buyer if they ask, or if they don't ask?
As an agent, yeah. So if you know that there's something that should have been disclosed but was not disclosed by the seller, then that's the one exception to the duty of confidentiality is you can disclose that to the buyer.
No. My question is, you know the seller done the remodeling or whatever without permit, right? Yeah. Okay, so if the other party, they don't ask you, do I need to still tell them?
Oh, absolutely, right? Because this says you tell them whether they ask or not. Yeah. Okay, yes?
No, it's what requires a building permit. If you finish your basement without a kitchen, you still carpet walls. You need a permit?
The international, it depends on the city. You'd have to look at the city code. I just tell you, I used to live in Holiday. The Holiday City Building Code requires you to pull a permit if you change a light fixture. That's straight.
Oh my
right?
gosh.
Now that we know, we're all terrified. By the way, when I sold my house in Holiday, I didn't disclose any of it. I finished the basement, I changed all the light fixtures.
Yeah.
I didn't have to, it didn't say I did.
It was before this.
It was before this, long before this. Yeah. Okay, any questions? We're there. There's some more stuff. If you have questions, we can talk about it after. I know, I don't want to intrude on your time, but thank you all for coming. Looks like there's still donuts. Rick doesn't want to eat them all by himself. And make sure you signed in so you get credit. Okay?
Just one time, right? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be around after. Yeah.
Sam, will I ever have to talk to you, or are you in the building?
I'm not in the building. We may talk. I'm here all the time.
Okay. When would I call actual papers anytime? Should I just talk to Rob?
You go to Rob, and then what typically happens is you go talk to Rob, and if he has a question, then we all jump on the phone together. If I'm here, I'll run over.
Okay. All right. Danny Lord, nice to meet you, man.
Good to meet you. Thank you. Thanks for coming. Hi.
I have one question.
Yes.
I just started working with an investor. The house that we're getting is like, it is a border paradise. It's horrible. I know that this says that it's supposed to be broom clean. If they don't counterback things, I mean, they have to remove that stuff then, right?
A lot of what Sam deals with.
Okay.
Yes, they do.
HOAs,
Okay.
real estate properties.
It's like, so I'm like,
Yeah, room clean.
Okay, Sam does. Awesome, yep, thank you. Sam's Spanish is great, right, Sam?
It's very Cuban Spanish.
I have a client that might need your.
I might get put in Yes, yes. You guys got any on paper?
No, because we give you on
You're not, huh? Yeah, so we just offer,
one of you.
no,
Look at this guy, got the property, for both days, claimed his brother actually bought the property years ago.
Yeah. Jen Allen, just meet Jen.